guys, and welcome to Petrol and welcome back to the headquarters of BMW UK. Now hopefully by now you've already watched my review of the M4 competition behind me, a truly impressive car. Well, today we're going to get our hands on the new M3 competition. Now if you haven't watched the M4 video, stop this video now, go and watch it and then come back again, because they really are a two-part series because there's so much overlap between the two cars. Many of the things I talked about with the M4 will be applicable to the M3 and vice versa. The obvious difference is the M3 is now a four-door saloon rather than a two-door coupe, so it should be a little bit more practical, but I'm not expecting the performance to be that different. But once I've driven both, I'll be able to give you my honest view, my compare and contrast between the M3 and the M4. But what I also want to do in this video is try and consider that car against one of my favourite performance saloons, and that is the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Both over 500 horsepower, both four-door saloons. It should be an interesting comparison. So I think what we need to do is get in the M3 comp, drive it back to the barn and start going through the details. Today's going to be a good day. You know what? I could really get used to these drives back from Farnborough, but now we're back at the barn. Let's talk through this M3 competition. This colour, by the way, is called Isle of Man green, and it's so beautiful. I think the M4 in that Sao Paulo yellow was a real bright, very in-your-face colour. This is, I know, still pretty out there, but it works so well with the darker black carbon fibre, dark trim, black wheels. I just think this particular spec is right up there. So what do we need to talk about with this particular car? Well, I'm not going to cover the grille because I've done that already. I've already said I really like it. However, up front there is another problem. To see this problem, just need to pop the bonnet. There's no sexy carbon fibre strut brace anymore. You've got these units here which are very functional, I'm sure, but I just think they could have been made to look a little bit nicer. And I mean, how many times you really open the bonnet? But honestly, if you had that carbon fibre strut brace, you'd just become a real carbon bore. And I just think that could have just been made to look a little bit nicer. And I know it's a little thing, but, you know. Anyway, epic engine under there. But to really, really understand and appreciate this M3, you need to go to the side. Because the side profile is where this car is very, very different from the M4. The M4, with it being a coupe, had a much more sloping roofline. This just seems to look shorter and squatter. It just looks more aggressive. The front door isn't as long. And that's quite useful for things like getting in and out of the car in car parks. We'll get in the back in a moment. I should have much more legroom in the back. And then there's a kind of bulge in the wheel arch. You've got the door here and then this real step, and you can look at that and think it looks a bit incongruous, but it just looks aggressive and just adds to the theatre at the back of the car, and you can see it in the rear view mirror as you're driving along. And that's what makes me start to really feel a lot more love for the M3 than I did for the M4. And then as you come round the back, the fact it's not a coupe, for me, helps the rear styling as well, because there's more of an angle to this rear screen. So there's an angular difference between the screen and the boot lid, and then this lip spoiler, and it just compresses the rear of the car. This car has the external carbon pack on it, so you got the little lip spoiler, the beautiful rear diffuser, and all in all, that rear three-quarter view with a big wide hips, this just looks to me like what an M car should look like. It really is. I'm becoming a very big fan. But anyway, we should be able to get in the back far more easily. Look, we have doors and everything. Now look, can I get my leg in there? It's still not gigantic room in here, but there's enough. This seat is as far back as it will go pretty much for me. And these carbon back seats, not only does the rear seat passenger have a beautiful view of some quite stunning carbon fibre work, but they're just a little bit thinner, so you get a little bit more space in the back. And it is a really lovely place to be, but the big difference between this and the M4 is I've actually got some head space. I've got a good couple of inches maybe between the top of my head and the headliner. And that would just make any kind of journey in the back for me far, far nicer. And that's what makes this car much more interesting to me. It is a far more usable car. If there's more than just the two people wanting to go, if you want to have some adults in the back, or if you want to have kids in the back, this car can certainly do that. There are a couple of things we need to talk about in the front that we didn't mention when I had the M4. If I can just extricate myself from this and reasonably look cool doing it. Big feet too. So it's still as special as the M4, but there are some big differences that I didn't really think about. First things first, as I've already mentioned, because this is a saloon, not a coupe, the driver's door is much shorter, and what that means is the B-pillar is literally just here. That means the seatbelt is here, but what it also means is when you're driving the car, not only do these seats go really low, so you're almost sat on the floor, but just having that B-pillar visible just makes you feel far, far more connected to the car. There's an argument that says you might not get as much visibility out the side, certainly the over-the-shoulder look, you've got a big B-pillar in the way instead of glass like you have in the M4. But I just feel that that shorter door and the B-pillar being there just makes me feel far more engaged in the car compared to the M4 anyway. Other slight difference in this car, so although we've got the same sports seats, in fact this car is very similarly spec'd to the M4. It's got all the same options ticked actually. So the only difference is the colourways here. This is Silverstone and black bicolour seats. And I really like it because it just accents the seat more. You can see the shapes and the design and the contours of the seats, and it just brings out a little bit more of the special nature of the seats. And I really like this. I don't think I'd quite go as far as having there are a couple of options to have some very bright colours on the seats. This for me is a nice mix. I think the ones in the M4 were a little bit conservative. These are just that next step up, so I like that very much. But just like the M4 I had, this car's got the visibility pack, Technology Plus pack, the all-important M carbon pack, which gives you the seats and the external carbon trim. And then it's also got a slight wheel upgrade. It's got 19-inch wheels at the front, 20-inch wheels at the back, and they are the M double spoke bicolour black alloys. So all in all, this car also has just shy of £12,000 worth of options on it. So these cars start at £72,000. So the car we're sat in on the road is about £86,700. Now that is a huge amount of money, but it's probably worth noting that I think there are some quite good deals to be done in terms of dealer contributions and things. So I think when you actually go and buy one of these and you start looking at financing one, that's probably not the price you're going to end up paying. The other option that could really bump that price up that isn't on this car and wasn't on the M4 is the carbon ceramic brake pack. Now that's called the M Pro pack, and that is £5 short of £8,000 to give you carbon ceramic brakes. Now I mentioned this when I had the M2 CS recently. I honestly think if you're only going to drive the car on the road, I think that carbon ceramic brakes, the main benefit they give you is you don't have to wash your wheels so much because you don't get so much brake dust. There's clearly a big saving in terms of weight, so there's an argument around unsprung mass as well. But in terms of actual stopping power, retardation, the steel brakes that are on this car work absolutely brilliantly. We might talk about them a bit more when we're out on the road. They're quite soft to start with. That first engagement of your foot on the pedal is relatively soft, and then when you push a little bit more firmly, they absolutely anchor on and they stop the car. Last thing to mention in the car, I love the display, but the car's got both wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, and there's a lovely wireless charge mat just there. So it just means, you know, using your phone and connecting, it's just super easy. You can use the inbuilt sat nav of the car, which is really good. I'm a big fan of the BMW one, or if you wanted to use something like Waze or Google Maps, you can do that as well. So all in all, a really nice place to sit. But these cars, although they shouldn't drive differently, they really do. So let's head out onto some of my favourite roads and discuss the differences between this and the M4 Comp. But I also want to have a think about this versus the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Now, it would be stating the obvious to say that these two cars, the M3 and the M4, drive similarly, because they do. I think there's tiny differences in the performance, but a normal person isn't going to spot those. What I would say though, there are a couple of differences. I've mentioned already about the seating position and the B-pillar position, just making you feel a little bit more engaged and a bit more connected with the car. The other thing is the M3 just feels a little bit more soft and supple in the suspension. I've gone through Sport, or through Comfort Sport and Sport Plus in both this car and the M4, and I don't know whether it's just me thinking it or whether it is actually the case, but it just feels a little bit better. Watch out the way, pheasants. Oh, pheasants are so stupid. It just feels a little bit better. Now, what I would say is I just drive the car in comfort all the time. I think the Sport and Sport Plus modes really are for a racetrack, or if you're going to be driving around a snooker table, because especially on a B road, the road surface and the road bumps and lumps that you're getting in the UK anyway, Sport and Sport Plus suspension mode, they're just too firm for me. So comfort all the way. One of the things that is a little bit disappointing for me with the M3 and the M4 Comp, again, isn't a great surprise. It's any auditory pleasure. Don't get me wrong, it sounds okay, but I think the days of having cars that just sound epic are long gone. I think it's almost impossible for a car manufacturer nowadays to make a car that sounds brilliant. They're just so restricted by emissions regulations and have to put so many filters and things in the cars that they just kill the sound. And I'm sure that if you got one of these and put an aftermarket exhaust on it, even if you kept it OPF back, I'm sure you could get it to sound an awful lot better, because it really doesn't excite me that much on the inside or the outside. It's not bad, but it's just not what you would have got from a car 3 or 4 years ago. The more time I've spent in these seats, I must say I like them. My particular body shape is suitable for them. I don't know what they would be like on a 3 or 4 hour long journey. I'm sure you'd probably start to get a little bit of a numb bum. But I think you would probably have to be careful speccing them if you're of a larger frame. The other thing would be quite interesting, I haven't had a passenger, but this seat is all about getting the driver to stay still, but the passenger has exactly the same. And I'd love to know what the average passenger thinks of being stuck in a bucket that even keeps your legs in a set position. I'm not so sure that a lot of passengers are going to enjoy that. Now, I think we've done quite a few comparisons between this and the M4. So what about my opening question of this and the Giulia Quadrifoglio, one of my favourite cars? Well, I'll tell you some things I prefer in the Giulia Quadrifoglio. The steering feel in the Giulia Quadrifoglio is stunning. The downside of that steering feel is because of the way the geometry is, you get the Ackerman effect when you're manoeuvring at low speed. The kind of car skips at the front, and I don't like that at all. Now, this car doesn't do that. And although the steering feel isn't quite as nice as the Giulia Quadrifoglio, it's by no means bad. In fact, it's absolutely brilliant. The other thing I like about the Quadrifoglio is I really love the fixed paddles to change gear rather than the steering wheel mounted ones. They just have a really beautiful tactile feel to them. But again, the ones in the M3 and the M4 do feel nice, and they've got this lovely kind of rubber padding on the back that just gives them a nice feel. And then the final thing, the Giulia Quadrifoglio, well, the noise it makes, especially in race mode, this M3 can't even come close. However, you can only tap into that race mode noise when you are in rear wheel drive with all the stability systems turned off, and that makes the car almost undrivable in cold conditions. And I think that's what's impressed me most about this car. It's been pretty cold while I've had it. The temperature's not really gone above 8 degrees. Now, I know some of my followers in Canada and places like that, that's not really cold. But a normal summer road tyre, really below 8 degrees, it's not operating in its, if you like, designed window. So you really want to be on something like an all-season tyre. But these Pilot Sport 4S tyres have been brilliant. But even in these colder conditions, the traction this car gives is just incredible. And I don't understand how it does it. I mean, it's unworldly. It's witchcraft, I tell you. Now, I know there is an X-Drive version of this car coming, and I can't believe I'm about to say it, but you don't need to go that far. You don't need an X-Drive one of these. The way it manages the traction is just so good, I actually think X-Drive isn't needed. And I really thought it would be. Rather nice RS6. So let's just wham it up the Petrol hill climb. See a little bit of slip there. Really good nose, like really good nose, but you've got the confidence to get on the throttle coming out of the corner, and it just helps you. Now, you can turn things off. It's got this almost a drift mode where it gives you the drift score as to how good your drift's going to be. I'm not going to do that on the public road. I want to keep my license. But honestly, you can really pin the throttle out the corners in this thing. It's amazing. Do you know what? I even love little things like the car that's displayed on the main MMI when you go into the kind of vehicle settings option is the same colour as the car. It drives me insane when you buy a car and the MMI hasn't got the same colour car as you. BMW, well done. So at the end of 2 magical days with the M3 and the M4 competition, what are my final impressions? Well, to be honest, I'm quite blown away. I knew these cars would be good, but I didn't realise they'd be as good as they are. And they are mighty, mighty in so many ways. They're almost too good. They're frustrating cars to drive because you can't possibly drive them on the public highway at 10 tenths. In fact, I don't think really you get beyond about 4 tenths. They've just got so much more to give. And then the other thing is, in terms of your driving talent, you know, these could give a really, really good driver just the ultimate driving experience. But what's really nice is you can tap into it even if you're not a really experienced, super advanced driver, because the car will look after you. Sometimes M cars, I think, rear-wheel drive, high-powered M cars are a little bit intimidating. But this thing deals with the power and the traction so well. I'd love to know what it's like in the wet or in very slippy conditions. Because although it's been very cold, it's been very dry over the last couple of days. But then there's nothing a decent set of all-season or winter tyres can't fix, I guess. Fit and finish-wise, stunning. I know they are a lot of money. It's a serious amount of money. Anything over 70 grand for me on a high-performance car like this starts to make my eyes water. But when you spec them up and they get into the kind of mid to high 80s, that's a lot of money, and it puts it up against things like Porsche. But, as I said, there are deals to be had, and you try going into a Porsche dealership and getting anything more than a free set of floor mats. Good luck. So, they are an interesting proposition, but for me, it's the M3 comp all day long. The M4 was great, but there's just something about this M3 that I think it looks, for my taste, it looks meaner and chunkier and just more of an M car. It's way more practical. You can get in the back and you've got more headroom. And then, as I've said before, just because of the shorter door and the position of the B pillar and these fantastic seats, you just feel like you're sat right into the car and you get an amazing sense of connection with the car. It really is a very special thing. Joe Achilles, I hate you because he's got one of these coming in literally a couple of weeks' time. For me, it would be Isle of Man green and this interior. I am absolutely in love with this car. Quite often it happens when I've got a really nice car, I don't really want to take it back, but I'm sat here driving wondering if BMW UK would miss an M3 comp. I mean, they've got loads of them. The car park's they've got loads of press cars on their press fleet. They won't miss another one, surely. I mean, I wouldn't put it on YouTube or anything or post it across social media. But yes, an M3 competition would sit well in my garage. Anyway, massive thank you to BMW UK for letting me have the cars back to back. It's been really, really interesting to compare and contrast both magnificent cars in their own way. And anybody who buys either of them is just going to absolutely love it. But I'm going to enjoy the drive of this car for as long as I possibly can. But I hope you enjoyed that one, guys. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol for plenty more content to come. And I'll see you on the next film, guys. You take care. Drive safe.